The room had been designed to make people forget who they were. Velvet curtains absorbed the hum of conversation. Chandeliers threw 1,000 small moons onto polished glass. A string quartet soared through a song so smooth it felt like perfume. The waiters moved like a mirage. Even the air was diffused, amber, expensive. 30 floors above the city, wrapped in light, the world below seemed theoretical. Before we get started, drop your city in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching from across the globe. Let's jump in. Maya Vale lifted a water glass to her lips and pretended the weight in her stomach was just the baby, and not dread. Her dress, a blue that matched the idea of an ocean rather than any specific ocean, fit better last week. She had bought it for tonight, their last night before the doctor's orders to avoid crowded events. One more, she'd told herself, whispering to the mirror like a pact. One more smile. One more evening of pretending everything is okay. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored pillar. A woman who looked like she had slept enough, like she wanted to be at a fundraiser where the price of admission could pay for a clinic wing. She pinched color into her cheeks. The baby moved under her palm. 1 foot, maybe an elbow. "Do you feel it?" she had asked Adrian earlier, taking his hand to her belly. He'd smiled, distracted, his phone lighting his jaw with cool light. Now he sat beside her, in a tuxedo that seemed to have been invented for him. Adrian Vale. The magazine profiles used words like titan and disruptor. They loved the myth of him. Born to a contractor who never finished high school, running a company whose profits could buy and sell countries. The profiles rarely mentioned his hands. They were small, precise hands that looked like they should be arranging clocks or cracking the shells of quail eggs without breaking the membrane. "They want me on stage after the auction," he said, not looking at her, eyes flicking to the room, a general surveying his battlefield. "It'll be quick. Then we can leave early," Maya said, smiling. "Doctor said I shouldn't be out too late." He nodded, still scanning. Across the room, a waiter leaned to refill a glass, and Serena Holberg laughed. Even in laughter, Serena's eyes were strategic. You knew it if you had ever been the object of them. Many had. She had a kind of symmetrical beauty that photographs never punished. There was a rumor that she had been a dancer, the kind that knows where every light in the room is. That rumor was true. She had taught tango in a basement studio, with a concrete floor and a single bar of mirror, the rent flexing each month like a muscle. Then Adrian had come for lessons, because someone thought philanthropy danced better when it was literal on a stage. He had brought his small, precise hands, and the hesitation he hid everywhere except in a dance frame. She had steadied him, and then. Now Serena stood with a cluster of donors in suits the color of midnight, holding a whiskey she barely sipped, her dress liquid black. You could be angry at her simply for understanding what she could do to gravity. "Let's go," Adrian said abruptly, standing. "They want to meet the Vales." "My feet are grateful," Maya said, and meant it. She rose slower than she liked, the weight in her back a localized storm. The heels a bad decision she couldn't undo at a round table in front of 1,000 people. She had promised herself not to think about the last 12 months, the appointment rooms with their antiseptic sympathy, and the ultrasound screens with too much silence. She touched the rim of her glass, as if that could anchor her to now. The donors asked the questions donors ask, about growth, about the new technology at the Vale extraction site upriver that supposedly reduced environmental impact by 30%. Maya smiled and nodded, saying things she had learned to say. "It's important to us. Adrian has always believed, when our child is here, we want—" The pronouns lodged in her throat like a wedding ring that doesn't quite fit. Adrian spoke in fluency, the words falling from him like coins. "Can you believe it?" One woman, all angles and diamonds, said to Maya, patting her arm in a gesture that would bruise. Working all hours and a baby on the way. I'd say you're a saint. Maya smiled, the kind that fogs up glass, and thought, I didn't ask for sainthood. A violin changed. The air recalibrated. The quartet swelled into a tango, a popular one, the kind the crowd would recognize. A murmur passed over the tables, the word spreading like a synchronized breath. Dance. Adrian glanced toward the bandstand, and an expression crossed his face that Maya used to think meant joy. Now she could feel the seams of it. He turned to her. You don't mind? The baby rolled, a wave under skin. Maya pressed her palm to the movement and said the thing she knew good wives said. Go, I'll watch from here. She tried to inject lightness into the sentence, a flotation device. He squeezed her shoulder, a gesture so practiced it felt like PR. And then Serena was there, arriving with the easy entitlement of a person for whom rooms opened. Ready? She asked, and her eyes flicked to Maya's stomach, and for a moment something like embarrassment moved over her face and was gone. Let's give them a show, Adrian said, and there was that boyishness that made people forgive him. The floor cleared. The pair walked to the center, as if following a dot only they could see. The room leaned forward. When they began, the first step was a whisper. Then Serena's heel traced a command into the floor, and Adrian complied. They were good. Of course they were. A good tango is an argument that doesn't need language. It is about the question of whether you can be led without being erased. Adrian's hand at Serena's back said, I refuse to hesitate. Serena's neck said, I will make your refusal look like poetry. Maya watched and felt nothing, and then felt too much. She thought of the morning when they had decided to try one last time after the miscarriage. How Adrian had told her he had to fly out that afternoon, that the board needed him, and she had smiled in that crisp way she had perfected and said okay. She thought of the day the doctor had shown them a flicker on the screen and said, heartbeat. And she had turned to Adrian and seen wonder fracture his face like glass catching light. That face wasn't here now. Here was a man who knew exactly how much pressure to apply at Serena's waist to make a room. Forget it was a room. A ripple moved through the crowd. It took Maya a second to understand it wasn't about the dance. One of the screens behind the bandstand blinked. It had been cycling through sponsors' logos and soft focus photos of children in artfully arranged poverty. Now the frame stuttered, and a new image burned in. A block of chat bubbles, bubble after bubble, names at the top. You're not going to leave her, are you? I'll leave when it makes sense. Timing is strategy. I don't want to be a secret. You won't always be. The font was horrifically familiar. So was the unsparing glow of the interface. The chat stream scrolled, rapid fire. Serena's name, Adrian's name. The words they had sent each other on nights when Maya had been sleeping in a house with 16-foot ceilings and no roof. The overdue confessions and the petty jokes and the plans that were not plans flickered out of context and into the room's collective attention. What? Maya whispered, airless. Her hands found the tablecloth as if it might convince gravity to behave. The other screens joined in. Their intimacy multiplied, became spectacle. A word flashed that turned Maya's blood to electric. Baby. I can't pretend your baby is ours forever, Serena had typed. It was an I that meant you, a shorthand for the destruction that would be normalized if they kept at this. The tango faltered. Serena's eyes shot to the screen and then to Adrian, not to gauge what he felt. She knew, but to calculate time. Somewhere in the room, a person shouted, "Shame!" and then more voices, a scattering that became a pattern. Security started to move. Maya's water glass tipped. She hadn't touched it. Her stomach seized, a fist of muscle, then pain like a wave breaking a wall. She gripped the edge of the table and felt the slickness under her palm. Her breath forgot itself. "Adrian," she tried to say, but the word turned into a gasp. Heat poured down her legs. The world went grainy at the edges. Serena was the one who saw. In that scattered, brutal second, Serena's eyes took in the chair tilted slightly, the woman with her hand clamped low on her stomach, the pooled liquid trailing into the expensive carpet. She looked at Adrian and then away, as if her neck had learned the motion already. And she moved. "Help!" she yelled, and the sound cut through the room's thick air, embarrassingly clear. "She's in labor!" The nearest donors turned, mouths like O's. The nearest server dropped a tray, and the crash became signal. For a suspended fraction of time, the only people in the room moving with any intention were Serena, the server who dropped the tray, and Maya, who was not so much moving as being moved by pain. Adrian stood on the floor, stock still. The screens behind him now showed more than chat. They showed graphs, stock lines, safety reports. A headline shot through the noise like a thrown knife. "Retaining wall collapses at Vale Upland site. 4 workers missing." Under it, live footage from a helicopter. Lights cutting into the dark smear of a hillside. People the size of toys. Security reached the bandstand. A hand gripped Adrian's arm. Roxanne from PR, all efficiency and clean lines. "We need to get you out," she said. "Now." "My wife," he said, and the words sounded like someone else trying them on. "We'll handle it," Roxanne said. "A photo here is a lawsuit." He hesitated. He had vowed never to hesitate. He had vowed it when his father had put a rifle in his adolescent hands and said, "Be a man," standing in the woods that smelled like cold iron and damp leaves. The deer in the sight had been brown and heartbreaking. In the memory, he still felt his palms, slick with the particular sweat produced where fear and love meet. He had said, "I can't," and his father had looked at him in a way that became a lifelong scar. He had been 13. The next week he had gone to the construction site and given orders to men twice his size until someone listened. Now he hesitated half a heartbeat, and that half a heartbeat expanded, made room for things he did not want. Roxanne pulled. The floor erupted into bodies. Someone lit a flare or a novelty smoke stick, it was unclear which, that sent up a curling cloud under the chandeliers, tripping the fire injury prevention in the ceiling. The sprinklers pulsed to life. Water sprayed the dance floor. People screamed, instinct finally replacing manners. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. The air filled with the smell of wet velvet and richer things. Maya tried to stand, and her legs didn't hold. Serena slid an arm under her with the instinct of muscle memory, the way you catch a falling object and do not calculate the physics. "Stay with me," she said, unnecessary but crucial. "We need an ambulance." "Don't!" Maya said through gritted teeth, and it took Serena a second to realize the word was not "don't touch me," but "don't leave me." It surprised her how those were not the same. "Please," Maya added, and it landed somewhere Serena didn't know she had left unguarded. Adrian took a step toward them. Roxanne's phone buzzed again. She forced it into his hand. On the screen, board calling. Then a message. Contain. Deny hack. Liability exposure. He saw and saw again the helicopter footage in the corner of the screen. Lights scanning dirt that had learned what it meant to give way. Another contraction seized Maya. Her whole body made a sound that human throats aren't meant to produce. Serena looked up past Adrian, as if to the ceiling. "What kind of coward are you?" she said to him, not loudly, but with a clarity that pierced. He let Roxanne pull him then, through the service door, away from the screaming and the sprinklers, the expensive water dripping down backless gowns and studded lapels like democratic rain. Outside in the hall, the carpet smelled new. The world reduced itself into a corridor with fire doors and a line of exit signs like progressive revelation. "We'll have a car at the back," Roxanne said, and he nodded, and the nod felt like a signature on a document he hadn't read. Behind them, an ambulance wailed through the building's acoustics. Someone choked. A woman cried, "My bag!" And another voice said, "Forget your bag." The elevator dinged, as if any of this were scheduled. They met at the hospital, because where else are humans most human? Maya arrived first. A man in a rumpled jacket shepherded her through a side door. Serena stayed long enough to be sure someone capable had hold of Maya, and then disappeared, not out of shame, but out of an understanding that if she stayed, things would go a way she could neither justify nor survive. In the fluorescent brightness of the maternity ward, the air was cleaner, the light meaner. It stripped events to fact. Fact. Maya Vale was in labor earlier than planned. Fact. Her blood pressure was high. Fact. The baby's heart beat fast and then slower, a metronome learning different time signatures. "Any complications in pregnancy?" the nurse asked, crisp. "I lost one before," Maya said, and the pronoun didn't feel like betrayal when applied to that other, nearly child. "Early," the nurse nodded, not unkindly, as if to say, "Almost everyone you will meet carries a version of this." Adrian arrived with a suit jacket over his arm and a mask half on like a penitent. Roxanne did not enter the ward with him. There are rooms in which PR cannot follow. He had the look of a man who had run while pretending he hadn't. In the hallway, a TV looped footage from the gala and then switched to the hill collapse, before finally landing on his face in a still photo that managed to capture everything anyone wanted to think about him. Maya looked up when he came in and looked away, then back, because looking was a compulsion that outran dignity. "You left," she said. No prelude. He started, a mouthful of corporate words coalescing. The contraction stopped her from hearing his sentence. She turned inward, a cave of effort. When it passed, she licked her lips, tasted chemicals and said, "Don't gaslight me. Not tonight." He shut his mouth. He stood by the bed and put his hand on the rail and couldn't make himself move it closer to her. He had never been good at places where miracles and bodily fluids coexist. He was a man who preferred outcomes that could be plotted on a chart. A doctor entered with shoes that squeaked. "We're going to need to monitor the baby closely," she said. "There's distress. We'll do everything we can." She spoke in the tone of someone who tells the truth without cosmetics. "Is the retaining wall collapse?" Adrian began, the wrong sentence picked from a list of wrong sentences, and stopped because even he could hear the shape of that error. The doctor blinked, recalibrated to the formula that wealthy means connected. "That the news? With your company?" He nodded. "I'm sorry," she said, and she did not mean for your stock price. "But I am going to ask you to put your phone away until we get your wife and child stabilized." He complied. The phone in his pocket vibrated like a trapped insect. He could have thrown it into the trash and he would still have felt it. Maya looked at him with the eyes of a person who sees a house she has lived in, striking a strange silhouette against a foreign sky. "I need you to be someone different than who you've been," she said. Just for now. He had no idea what that meant, and every idea at once. In a clean, bright room, Maya brought their child into the world to the sound of an alarm that slowed and then stabilized. The baby emerged furious, a small creature whose first act was to protest how quickly the temperature had changed. The nurse lifted the body with practiced hands, a small human with a screaming engine, and for an instant, Adrian understood what it means for a story you thought would be about you to be about someone else instead. Then the baby went quiet, a beat too long. The air turned thin. The nurse was efficient, and there were words like suction and oxygen. The lack of sound created its own music. Maya did not see her child. She felt the void where a cry should be, and understood it like a word in a language she had never studied. "No," she said. Not a scream, just a syllable containing the history of that other, almost child, and the months of fear. The room moved in orchestrated blur. The cry came then, jagged and imperfect and absolute. It baptized the fluorescent lights and the sterile counters and the basins. It thawed something she had frozen, not to preserve, but to survive. The first time Adrian saw his child's face, it was mostly covered by a towel and fingers. The nurse said, "We'll need to keep the baby in NICU for observation." And the word observation held multitudes. In the small rupture that follows birth, when everyone who is not newly born takes an extra breath, Adrian's phone vibrated again. He took it out without thinking and saw a message from the board. Statement released. You did not authorize, but it is in your name. We regret to inform. The words were corporate and sanitary. They minimized. They were a freshly printed lie. He looked up. Maya's eyes were glass and fire. "Delete it," she said. "Whatever it is. For 1 hour, be nothing but a father and a husband." Words rearranged like magnets on a refrigerator. Husband, father, father, father. The syllables teased something ancient and ugly in him. His father had believed there are only 2 kinds of men, those who leave blood on the ground and those who bleed. There was no category called men who clean up blood that others should never have had to spill. Adrian's thumb hovered over reply, and then leaned into a decision he had rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times and never executed. He put the phone face down on the metal counter, turned off. He held his child's foot between forefinger and thumb. Tiny heel pressed into his fingerprints. He tried to form a sentence that would not be a pretense. "You don't know me yet," he said softly to the foot, because the face felt too intimate. "But I'm going to try to be someone you want to know." Maya looked at him, as if time had malfunctioned. Then her face folded into a grief so old it could not be solely hers. She turned her head away and wept, not because she trusted him, but because her body had decided to stop holding what it had been withholding. Serena walked the length of the hospital parking lot twice, and then sat on a curb as if the concrete could answer something. The gala had disintegrated into a living cautionary tale. The activists she had coordinated with were thrilled, and then frightened, and then thrilled again. She had told herself the righteousness would be clean. It was not. It never is. Among her messages were congratulations, warnings, and a single text from an unknown number that said, "You lit a fuse attached to a mine you didn't build. It's going to blow everything, including you." She had met Adrian in that basement studio where a radio sat on an upturned crate and the mirrors were clean because she had made them so. He had wanted to dance because the gala videos did well on social, and he knew that narrative was capital. She saw his calculation and took his money. She had told herself, "You are not a bad person for making a wealthy man give you money to learn control." It was later, after he told her the story about the dare and the sight and the look on his father's face, that she made the first mistake. She had pitied him. Pity is a small erosion. Even if you mean well, it moves ground you do not realize is load-bearing. Her brother had worked one of Adrian's sites, not the one that collapsed tonight, A different one, different town, same script. When safety procedures were suggestions and overtime was a math problem, he had fallen. He had not died, but the version of him that could run without thinking did. The company had paid out enough to cover surgery and a year of rent. They had asked them to sign a non-disclosure so kind that you could almost forget how unkind it was. Serena had not forgotten. She had also not forgiven her brother for forgiving. "We need to be practical," he had told her, a cigarette in his handsome fingers, the same hands that used to throw her in the air when they were kids, catching her without looking. "We can't fight giants." She had not believed that. She believed in levers and angles. She believed in Troy, in Calvary, in stories where a well-placed betrayal saved more than it doomed. She started dancing with men whose wives wore eternity bands and who wanted something they would not name. She had told herself she was investigating. She had told herself she was righteous. She had not planned to like the way Adrian concentrated. She had not planned the way he became less coordinated when he laughed. She had not planned to stop looking forward to telling the activists each new piece she learned. The hack tonight had been the culmination of months, of favors handed out like candy, of a boy who understood code better than rent, of a waitress at the hotel who wanted to watch rich people panic. Serena had known there would be spectacle. She had not known there would be the extra headline, the one about the hill and the missing workers. She had not known there would be a woman in a blue ocean dress whose water broke like a rebuke in the middle of an expensive floor. On the curb, Serena put her face in her hands and did the math again. One affair ending in deliverance for a town. One man forced to stop pretending his profit could be worn like virtue. One baby born early. The equation, ugly and human, did not balance. She stood and went inside, head down. The automatic doors sighed. She asked for the maternity ward like she had the right, and to her surprise, the nurse told her the room number. She asked if you were okay. She didn't say to keep you out. Serena hesitated. She had not expected this. She didn't know what to do with something that felt like mercy. She took the elevator up and walked the hall, counting the doors like she was collecting proof that linear progress existed. At the door, she paused and drew a line down her dress with her palm, as if you could smooth a person. She knocked. Maya's sister opened it a crack and scowled, the kind of look you make when you are very tired of being kind. "You have some nerve," the sister said, and Serena could not argue. "It'll take a minute," Serena said. "I won't say anything poisonous." The sister snorted. "You already did." She turned to the room. "Maya, the ballerina," a voice from inside that was tired and derisive at once. "Let her in." Serena entered, as if entering a church she didn't believe in, but respected. Maya lay pale on the bed, hair uncooperative, eyes clear. The baby was elsewhere. Machines whispered. Adrian sat in a chair with the posture of a person trying to be smaller than he is. He looked up, saw Serena, looked down. The room did not explode. It was almost a disappointment. "I wanted to say," Serena began, and then realized she had never practiced this speech because she had not believed she would be given the chance to deliver it. "I didn't know about the hill. We had been planning the screens for months. It wasn't supposed to be this night and that night. I didn't intend to break everything," Maya said, when Serena stalled out. "Not everything," Serena said, turning the phrase like a bead. "Just some things that needed to be broken." Maya's mouth moved into a shape that might have been humor if you were generous. "That's the thing about breaking," she said. "You're rarely the one who has to live with the mess." Serena looked at Adrian and then didn't. "I am sorry for what happened to you," she said to Maya. "That sounds useless. It is useless. I can't fix it. You don't owe me anything, especially not your forgiveness." She didn't say, "I didn't expect to like you when I was constructing your humiliation." She didn't say, "I was always braver in theory." Maya's eyes flicked to Adrian with something like contempt and something like almost tenderness strangled at birth. Then she surprised all three of them. "Were you trying to help his men?" she asked. "My brother was hurt at one of the sites," Serena said. "Not the one tonight. He walks with a cane now. Reads a lot of spy novels like That Helps." She smiled at herself. "I thought if I could knock Adrian down, he'd stop. Or if he couldn't stop, others would stop him. Maybe they will. Maybe I will," Adrian said, before he knew he was going to. He sounded like a man on a bridge he didn't trust, hearing the cables sing. Both women looked at him, surprised to be addressed by a future tense. "Right now," Maya said. "You need to be here. Later, when the sun gets up, you can try to be useful." He nodded because he could not argue with it. He didn't say that the board had given him statements to read, parts to play. He didn't say that the phones in the pockets of his tailored audience would be complaining that he had left them in crisis like an owner leaves a dog in a car. He just nodded. Serena pulled a folded paper from her clutch and set it on the bedside table. "It's the number of a lawyer who doesn't mind losing friends when it's necessary," she said. "And there's an address on the back. It's for a small church in Riverbend. That's where the collapse is. They're going to need people who don't just send money." "We'll send money," Adrian said, the first thing he thought, because money had always been the easiest unit of apology. "Go," Serena said. "Not tonight, but go. You, not your money. You need to see it." She looked at him like a teacher back in that mirror-lined studio. "The only thing that changes men like you is the smell of where your decisions land." He flinched. It felt like a slap from someone who had been given permission he hadn't consciously given. Maya picked up the paper, considered it like a playing card, and set it down. "You didn't have to come," she said to Serena. Her tone had not yet found whether this would be an indictment or a gift. "I wanted to see," Serena said, "if you were okay." Maya's laugh was unkind and somehow marvelous. "Define okay." "Alive," Serena said, suddenly fierce. "Not destroyed." "Alive is true," Maya said. "The rest is to be determined." Serena nodded. She looked at the machines, at the hollow in the blanket where a small person had recently been. She surprised herself by taking a step toward Adrian and then stopping. "You are better at dancing than at being decent," she said. "I hope that changes." "It will," he said, and they all heard the quiet gamble in it. When Serena left, she passed a TV in the hall, playing a panel discussing what the hack meant for tech ethics. She wanted to grab the TV by its plastic throat and say, what it meant was a woman gave birth in fear, and a town lost 4 men who were not yet counted, because numbers are cleaner than names. But televisions do not listen. The thing about redemption arcs is they are less arcs than stairs, and you can fall. By morning, the world had arranged its morning face. The sky was the particular grade of grey that rated as expensive in minimalist magazines. Adrian stood in the hospital chapel because it was the one room where even he could not be interrupted, and recorded a video on his phone. The light was horrible and honest. He had rehearsed a speech full of old him, words that rounded out the facts to what he used to consider a pleasing shape. Now he did something new. He told the truth as far as he understood it at that morning's altitude. "I led a private life that betrayed my wife," he said. It felt like tearing skin to make a clean line. "I lied to people who believed me, and at the same time, my company failed to protect the people who make our profit possible. If there's a connection between those things, And I think there might be. It's that I have been very good at compartmentalizing. That's a word we use to excuse failing to be honest. I am not making a statement on advice of counsel. I am telling you that I am stepping down as CEO today. An independent body will investigate the collapse at Vale Uplands. We will fund that however they like, and we will not interfere. And my wife— He stopped because the word was too large for that moment. My wife will decide if she wants me around to help raise our child. My job is to accept her decision without pressuring her. He didn't cry. He wasn't the crying kind, and the world did not need to see him practice the appearance of contrition. He posted it himself. No filters, no copy edit. He threw the phone into the chair like he had just thrown himself off something and half hoped to drown. Outside the prayer room, Roxanne stood with her lips pressed into a line so thin it did not exist in 2 dimensions. "This is reckless," she said. "We could have controlled the narrative. I am tired of controlling narratives that control people," he said, shocked to hear it, and somehow not. "You're going to lose everything," she said, and she meant it not as a threat, but as a prediction. "Maybe," he said, "but not everyone." He meant the small person in the NICU whose fingers had gripped his thumb like they were telling him his nerve endings were insufficient to register all the consequences he had set in motion. The video blew up. The stock fell. Lawyers assembled. Activists used the word victory and then used the word watch. His father called and left a message in a voice that had never learned regret. "You have made a fool of yourself," it said, "as if fools cannot build institutions." Adrian did not call back. Maya watched the video on the small hospital screen without expression and then turned it off. She had expected apology. She had not expected accuracy. She slept. In the afternoon, she signed papers with slow hands. She told a nurse the name she wanted to give their child, her grandmother's, not the one she and Adrian had chosen before. When Adrian heard the name, he smiled into his chest where it couldn't be seen. It was not his call anymore. He felt relief, like the first normal breath after a bruise. That evening, a priest brought a basin and water. Adrian didn't know whether they were going to baptize or wash hands. He discovered he didn't care. There are rituals to make human things legible. He was trying not to be allergic to them. 3 days later, Maya went home to her sister's apartment instead of the glass house with the inconvenient ceilings. She had never loved that house. It had always made her feel like an accessory her husband had misshelved. The baby came with her, a car seat like a piece of modernist sculpture, carrying cargo better than art. "Do you want me to come?" Adrian asked, uncharacteristically quiet. "No," Maya said, and the word was not a punishment. "Come tomorrow. Bring coffee." She softened then in a way that made him ache. "Bring your hands. You're going to change diapers." He nodded. Every board meeting in his life, suddenly the warm-up for learning not to flinch at the smell of certain truths. He learned. He learned to put his phone in a drawer and listen to breathing dominate a room. He learned that fatigue is a kind of love, a willingness to be less than you could be for the sake of something that needs you to be particular. He learned to show up at Riverbend. 3 days after they came home, he drove to the church Serena had written on the back of the lawyer's card. He did not send anyone from logistics. He went in jeans and a sweatshirt and felt like he was wearing a costume. The church smelled like coffee and damp paper. Folding tables had turned themselves into an export of kindness. Boxes of diapers, stacks of towels, a woman with a spreadsheet. The hillside still bled earth into the river. Men and women stood together with the air of people who had become experts in a crisis they hadn't ordered. He talked to a man whose son was still missing. He did not tell the man his title. The man did not ask. They carried bottled water from a truck to a doorway, and then out again, because the doorway had been reassigned. The work felt like a parody of usefulness, and yet he did it, because sometimes you do the parody long enough that reality learns from it. He stood at the edge of the hill where the retaining wall had given up. He smelled what Serena had said, the smell of where his decisions land. It was a mix of mud and machinery, of disturbed root and diesel, of stone learning. Too late, that it cannot hold if the math was wrong. He wanted to put his nose in the dirt like an animal. He wanted to apologize in a language that did not have the word spin. He did not know what else to do. At night, he left the site for a motel that charged by reasonable increments. He watched a baby on a screen make the face she got when milk was coming. He watched Maya yawn without covering her mouth because who covers their mouth in front of a person who has wiped vomit from your hair? He watched himself not be the man in the magazine. People called him names online, some of which he deserved, and some of which were poetry that deserved better than him. Shareholders sued. An attorney told him he had just painted a target on himself and then asked how he felt. "Like I finally stopped holding my breath," he said, and the man made a face like that answer had tax implications. Serena came to Riverbend twice and then stopped coming because the townspeople did not need her to narrate their grief. She sent money she didn't have, and time she did. She called her brother and said, "I did a big thing." And he said, "You always do, kid." And they didn't talk about whether big means wrong. When a journalist asked for an exclusive, she said, "It's not my story." And for the first time in her adult life, she believed it. In the stretch of weeks that become months, the Uplands investigation returned phrases like criminal negligence and systemic failure, and names like supervisors who had made certain calls because those calls were how you keep your job. People resigned. People were charged. A memorial service was held for 2 men who were confirmed dead and 2 whose bodies were never found. The service used the word "found" wrong in a way that made the throat tight. Adrian attended, not at the front but in the middle, a man wearing a suit he had no right to wear, his tie knotted like penitence. He didn't speak. No one asked him to. When a woman tripped on the church steps, he steadied her elbow, then took his hand away, because he had not earned touching anything that morning. Back in the city, Maya took the baby to appointments and learned that everyone wants to tell you how to be a mother in a voice that says they invented the concept. She chose people who used the phrase, "How can I help?" and avoided those who used the phrase, "What you should do." She watched her husband become someone who shows up, not because it was a clause in a contract, but because the act of being there had become foundational, like the base of a wall you don't want to see collapse. She did not forgive him. Not right away. Maybe not ever in the way movies choreograph forgiveness. She was trying something else. She was trying to believe that the person who had hurt her might be worth the effort of not becoming someone who hurts for sport. One afternoon, 6 months after the gala, Serena waited at the back of a community center opening in Riverbend. It had been built with money scraped from various sources and from a fund Adrian had endowed with a name that didn't include his own. There were no cutting ribbons. The doors simply opened. Children ran their hands along new banisters. The banisters did not splinter. Maya was there with the baby on her hip. She moved through the small crowd, like a person who had learned her body's new dimensions. Serena approached, as if approaching a precipice she might or might not deserve to survive. "Hi," Serena said, which was the kindest possible first word. "Hi," Maya said. "He did it," Serena said, nodding at the building. I didn't think he would. I would have bet against him. I did bet against him. I still bet against him, Maya said, and a smile glitched across her face before it found sincerity. Just lower stakes. The baby blew a saliva bubble with the confidence of kings. Serena laughed despite herself. She looked at the child like a person looks at the view that makes the climb make sense. I wrote you a letter, she told Maya, but I didn't send it. Good, Maya said. Letters are weapons when you don't know what you want to do with them. She shifted the child. Would you like to? She paused, recalibrated. Do you want to hold her? Serena shook her head, like the idea was a breakable thing she couldn't afford. No, she said. She's not my story to touch. Maya nodded once, through an expression that repainted a history in a new color. Thank you for coming, she said. Not tonight. Back then. I didn't deserve to help, Serena said. But I did. I'm still not sure what that makes me. Human, Maya shrugged. Barely. They stood watching neighbors tune a guitar. Sometimes the present, when you obey it, becomes its own moral. When they parted, the goodbye was not loaded. It was the kind you say at the end of a shift. Later that evening, Adrian arrived. Late on purpose. He had learned to let some rooms be defined by the people that weren't him. He stood by the door and watched his daughter stare at the fluorescent lights as if they were fairy kingdom. He carried chairs because chairs are the first things you can carry when you don't know how to carry grief. He made coffee badly. A teenager rolled her eyes and showed him how to make it right. He asked her name. He used it. When he approached Maya, he waited for her to indicate if he should stand or sit. He had forgotten how to expect yes. She nodded at the chair, and he took it. They watched the kid with the guitar find the right chord. The night put its arm around the building. People who had been strangers learned the choreography of moving past one another in a hallway. Sometimes that is salvation. Do you remember the deer? He asked, surprising himself with the choice of a beginning. She did not look at him. You told me the story when we were 26, she said. You tried to turn it into a legend. Your father taught you not to hesitate. It explained how you make money so fast people think it's a religion. I've been thinking, he said, hesitant, recognizing irony and admitting it. Maybe what I needed to learn was not about speed. Maybe it was about which things deserve hesitation and which deserve immediate movement. And which are which? She asked. Leaving you to dance, he said, was something I should have hesitated from until the impulse died. Running to you when you were in pain was something I should have done without a thought. And the wall? She asked, looking up, the question pitched like a dart, true to its arc. I should have hesitated when the report said we were over budget and the supervisors wanted to cut corners, he said. I should have stopped building until we could be sure. And then I should have moved like fire to fix what we had broken. I did both in the wrong order. That is what I'm trying to learn not to do now. She considered him. He saw her see him, not romantically, not dramatically, but as a person making a math problem out of events. He thought that might be the most trust he deserved. Tomorrow, she said at last, you can pick her up from the clinic and take her to your mother's. She keeps asking. He almost smiled and checked himself, not to perform humility, but because joy should be quiet in this room. I'd like that, he said. Thank you. They sat in the sound of people doing ordinary things, which is sometimes the opposite of chaos and sometimes its only answer. Behind them, on the street, a car backfired and nobody flinched. The town had decided to live. The story does not end. It only reaches a place where pausing makes sense. Because what happened at the dinner, that moment when a man left his expecting wife to take the hand of a woman who was not his wife, and the world he made for himself cracked open, is not a fable with a single moral. It holds more than one. The way public humiliation can be both just and cruel. The way private betrayal tangles with public harm. The way people can want two incompatible things and be punished for choosing the wrong one and for not choosing at all. If you were Adrian, if you were standing under the chandelier when the violin unrolled its red carpet, if you saw the screens flash your wrongness into 1,000 eyes, if a woman you had loved one way was calling for help, and a woman you had promised to love a different way was doubled over in pain, what would you have done? Would you have stayed on the dance floor and insisted on finishing what you started? Would you have run to your wife even if it meant letting a lawyer assemble a case against you while you held a hand slick with amniotic fluid? Would you have walked out a side door because you believed you could fix it all from a quiet room? Tell me. Tell us. In that glare, with that music, with those two paths that both looked like descent, what should a person have done?